Hello and welcome or welcome back if you're not new. It is time for a just not my favorite art supply video. That was a challenge I kind of put out for myself and anybody who wants to participate. I got a large stash of art supplies that are too good to throw away, but they're not my favorite. So I tend not to use them and I feel bad about not using them, and sometimes I just get locked up because I should use these, get rid of them, and then go on to using my good stuff. I'm sure I'm not the only one feeling stuff like that. And here I got three products today that I want to use. I got the watercolor crayons from Staedtler, and I got a 12 set, and I took the paper off. If you buy them, they're wrapped in paper, but they kept on sliding off, so in a fit of hysteria, I just pulled all the paper off. I can tell what colors it is, anyways, and yeah, I've broken them on purpose because stumps work as well as anything else. There's nothing wrong with this set, other than the paper was annoying. It's just not my favorite. I quite frankly like my Neocolor 2s from Caran better. And that's it. I made a review of this and that they're quite okay. I made a landscape with them and it was quite fine. They're just not my favorite, as I said. So I want to see if I can incorporate these today. Then there are my 12 set of Staedtler Karat pencils. It's their art grade, and I paid way, way, way too much for these. And I just don't like them much. As you can see, I have actually intently tried to use them, and they're still not my favorite. They're okay if things like light fastness doesn't matter to you. You can get them up to a set of 60. And as of late, I've noticed that Statler has lowered the price, or whoever sells them has lowered the price. So they, at least in Germany right now, they're at a price range where I think the price and the performance kind of match up better than it used to. I paid the same for these as I paid for my Albrecht Dürer uh, watercolor pencils, and so I expected a little more from these. Um, it's a standard color choice as you get them from Statler, and that is fine. It works okay. Again, just not my favorite. I These are use and lose. I am using them up, and I'm not buying anymore. I got a list in here of the colors that is in this set because there's no color name on the pencils. There's just a number, and the number correlate to a name that is in this little folder that you get with it. The colors are, as far as I know, available open stock. I just don't know where. I also haven't looked for them, so I don't really care. But if anybody else is interested, they are available. They work as it should. The brown has, for me, been a little bit streaky and hard to dissolve. I don't know if I got a one faulty pencil, but that's the fact of it. And then I got the ColourTint from Spectrum Noir. I am by no means a big fan of Spectrum Noir's pencils. I really like their alcohol markers, but their pencils is a problem. These, when you lay them down and you use them, they work fine and they got a really nice color range. But as with the other, well, I have to say, I have these and I have a set of their regular colored pencils, and in both cases, they break like there's no end to it. They are so impossible to sharpen. I've tried with a mechanical sharpener, I've tried hand sharpeners and different hand sharpeners, and twisting this and twisting that. It doesn't matter. The cores are broken, and that is the only reason why these are not really on my favorite list. They got two sets. They got what is that? That is called Nature, and this one is called Primary. They are not particularly cheap to buy, so that's a part of also why I'm disappointed in them. I kind of hope that when I pay some price for it, that is not a kind of a kid and hobby price type of thing. I hope to get something that works, and they only kind of do. They also make regular watercolor pencils, and I just do not want to buy them because after two failures, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with Spectrum Noir's pencils until they come out and say, okay, we changed the problem. And I haven't seen any of that. These are also not available open stock. Um, there is one pencil in here that's kind of almost priceless. It is this one. It's called Maze. It's kind of an ochre type of color. In any other set of tinted graphite, I've I got two more kinds. I got the ones from Statler, and I got the the ones from Derwent. There is no yellow. There's kind of a yellowish green, and that's it. And it turns green because every time you mix graphite into anything yellowish, it goes green because graphite is blue or grayish blue. This one they have included. They can't put either there's no graphite or very 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 little in here. That's kind of a yellow. I have used these, but not as much as the breakage indicates. If they didn't break, they would be fantastic, but they break. But I'm gonna try and use them anyways. There are some good colors in there. So that's my choice of art supplies for now. I might pick out something if I think I need it, but this is my base. I have on good watercolor paper. This is Saunder Waterford's. No, it's St. Cuthbert's. Saunder Waterford. Hot press, and I think it is high white too. I'm not sure. I think it's high white. I have cut it down, and I've drawn part of an artichoke. There's like a leaf missing there. Let's get that in there. Otherwise, I just forget about it. So I thought that would be a good thing to try. And let me get. I got the reference photo is of Pixabay. And what I'm thinking about is to make kind of a background with these. I'm a little unsure if I want to do that first or later. I think I'll wait until later. And what I'm going to start with, because the yellow in here works so well, is to start at least on the top of these leaves, put some yellow down. Because this is interesting because it has kind of green, bright green tops, and then they go redder towards the bottom. And there's some brown striping in here too. And I thought this one was good for colored pencils too, because there's that streaking in the stem and in the leaves. So and because I know this one dissolves quite okay, and I don't want to use a ton of water, so I'm using just actually a brush for the husband and cats picked out. Okay, so this brush is really a brush for acrylics. It's a little stiff. It's a synthetic. but I don't want too much water when I'm working with watercolor pencils. Normally I wouldn't pull it out so much, but this is the base layer and I want the yellow just to be a base tone here. Yep. Making sure, oh, there was no yellow there. I forgot one. It's gonna be interesting. I'm gonna try and just put it where I think I didn't put water. That worked out okay. There's a lot of yellow down there, but that's okay. And we have to let it dry. So the paper I'm using is a 300 GSM 100% cotton watercolor paper, so it doesn't get much better than that. Let's dry. Okay, it's dried for about 5 minutes or so. Now in here we got a green and another green and a third green, and there are some of all the tips that broke off sharpening. So let's see. Let's see. And because they're streaky like that, I'm not careful with how I lay down my colors, because I hope that I can wash them out and some of the streakiness will stay there. And if not, I'll go back with a dry pencil and put them in later. It could be sharper, but Spectrum Noir. See if I can avoid sharpening it at all. And this is part of one of the ugly stages where we haven't finished things yet. And I have seen so many people give up drawings about at this stage because, oh, it doesn't look like anything. And they haven't had the experience to know that if you keep going, you can save it. You can't go from nothing to perfect in one go. Not very many can. Not many I've known, at least. Certainly not me. Almost everything I do go through at least one ugly phase. So the question is to just power through it. I'll start. I'm not coloring the edges, I'm coloring around the edges, kind of in a negative space type of thing for shading. To make them, the leaves stand out from each other a little bit. So it's the shadow underneath it that kind of defines the shape of the top of each leaf. Yeah, and I wasn't even pushing that hard. I guess I have to sharpen it, and my sharpening tools are right here. This one is quite sharp and has a container. It has an eraser on the other end. Feels okay, sturdy, I guess. Let's add some water again. Not necessarily a lot, just a little to soften things up and blend in the colors. Not going for too much detail quite yet. Just checking that I'm getting to the colors that I want for this layer. And you might notice that I'm kind of going dark and light at the same time. And that's because I'm not moving the pigment around a lot. So, and these doesn't bleed into each other. Color pencils need a lot of water before they do that. So you can work on light and dark areas at the same time. As long as you don't do this, move the brush from the dark out into the light too much. Unless that's the effect you're going for, of course. They're not dissolving too much, which is nice. That was way too much water. I'm pulling it out into the background because that could also work as a shade. So now everything is soaking wet, so it's time to let it dry. That was layer number 2. It is now dry. And if you're in doubt when something is dry, when you're painting with watercolors, touch it lightly, because if it's really wet, you might ruin it. But if you're in doubt if it's dry, if it's feeling a little bit cool, it still felt dry maybe, but if there's a temperature difference between where it was wet and where it is, it's dry, then it's still kind of a little bit wet, and leave it to dry some more. Especially if you use just regular watercolors. If you start painting while it's cold, but but sort of dry to the touch, you might get something that bleeds crazy into each other. So that's a little tip for you there, if you need it. And if not, you got it anyways. I can see I did a mistake over here. So I need to kind of define that leaf is behind. It's okay, because they're gonna get some brown parts. So this time I'm gonna try and be a little more defined with my lines. Start defining edges and the streaks and the leaves here. So they're darker towards the base. I'm actually gonna add some red at some point at the very base here. But not now. So in the first layers, there's room for some mistakes. It's getting harder and harder to correct as you get more layers. The final layers, you shouldn't make too obvious mistakes. And if you do, yeah, you did, and you have to figure out how to correct it. But that's art for you. We all make mistakes, and we make mistakes in every single piece of art we do, small or little. Some we notice, some we don't. Sometimes we notice the mistake years after we made a piece, and we go back and look at it and go, oh, I really like this piece, and then it's like, oh, but I make mistakes here and there. Live with it. That's just how it is. And if you don't like it, do it over. That's the best way to correct art mistakes, I find, is to redo the pieces that you are kind of happy with, but there were some mistakes that you now know how to avoid. Then go have another try again and see, prove to yourself that your art process and your skills have changed since then, or just your taste of things, how you like them. These are quite soft, so they don't hold their point very well. So sharpening would be a thing if you want well-defined lines. And as they don't sharpen as you... No, you didn't see them not sharpen, you saw them just break. The tooth of the paper already feels like it's kind of filling up. It's not as easy to draw on anymore. Let's see. Not so much point. I need to sharpen it a bit. Now I have to be really careful because I want some fine lines here. I don't want it to snap again. And from here on, I'm not gonna wet everything. I'm gonna just go where I want things softened. Like these, some of the lines kind of end a little abruptly. So just soften that up a bit. There was a drop of water I moved. And the brush now is almost dry because I don't want to soak the paper. I just want to soften things up a little bit. Now at this point, I got kind of the level of color I want. And now I think I'm gonna try, and I haven't tried this on this paper, so I'm gonna be a little bit careful. I'm gonna start on a bit of a background. I'm putting it on ever so lightly because I really don't want it to streak too bad. Just put a bit of a shade in there. It's a little bit streaky. But not something I can't live with. Now, if you don't want things to streak, don't use a point and don't push it into the paper if you do have a point, and that's the only thing you got to work with. Here I'm working a little bit on a blunt side. And that is why it might make sense to have some pieces with no paper, because you can also take just a piece of it and work it on its side like this. I'm not working it into the wet area because I seriously don't want a wet sticky mess. You can use them directly in the water, but it makes a mess, and right now that's not what I want. And you have to think about where you dry one of these, where you put it. Because if you put it back in the box while it's wet, it's going to contaminate the next color, especially if you move the box. Maybe you don't care, and then that's fine. That's you. I like my colors to stay fairly clean. Just a gentle rub. And I'm gonna mix in some of this. I believe this is a Van Dyke brown, at least in some parts. And this is kind of a, not too reddish brown, but it is a little reddish, and that will make the color of this pop some more. Now we're gonna have to dry it for a long time, because this is gonna make the paper wet. I should probably use a bigger brush, but I like to go in and be able to follow the contours here. Yeah, when the brush is too wet, it just picks up the pigment, which is not quite what I want. So now I have to go over that again. That was my mistake. I could also just have used the regular watercolor for the background, but I need to use those crayons up, so that's what I use. And I don't mind that using a small brush here. It makes the water control a little easier, and I do want some texture in the background, so I don't mind it being a little uneven, a little streaky. If I wanted it even, I would have used a different technique. Then I would have either used it as a pan and dissolved it and put it on the paper with a bigger brush, like this. Maybe not a bigger brush, but then you get a more even distribution of the pigment. And now I got a wet hot mess to dry somewhere, but that's okay. It's just this little stump. It will take me forever to use up this set because a little of this goes a long way, especially when I'm working like I am on A5-ish size papers. And I do that for two reasons. One is that is the size that kind of fits with my lack of patience. In artwork, I have a hard time finishing really large pieces. And the other thing is that A5 and A6 size papers, ish, It doesn't have to be on the exact measure. Um, that's fit best under my camera with the overhead video I'm doing. If I had to use like an A3, the camera would have to be almost up under the ceiling, and you wouldn't see it any better. Actually, would see it worse, and I would have to have some side cameras to capture what I actually do. That might be a thing in the future, but for right now, it's not on in the works. We lost a Logitech camera like the one I'm using. We can't find it anywhere. If we find that, I might get a palette or a side view camera. But as long as we can't find it, and as long as we see, hot mess. Should have used just a watercolor pen. I can show you also, when you have a wet thing like this, you of course also get very much more intense lay down on the paper. Now it's like almost black ink. And because this is the base layer, I'm kind of a lot sloppy because we can change things up a bit afterwards. Some of the stuff you do on base layers will show up on the next layers, so you might not want to go too crazy and do too scribbly if you don't want to see it later. Now the paper starts to warp a little bit because I didn't tape it down, and that's okay. This was supposed to be the dark side. Now this is dry enough to go over again. But then I'll have to leave it to dry. So when you're doing mixed media like this, you can do whatever you like. My suggestion is that you use each media for what it in the piece work best. You can sit and make details with these crayons if you sharpen them and fiddle enough with it, but it's unnecessarily difficult. But they're good at making larger details. I could have used them as the base color or backgrounds and stuff like that, of course, the details. And the pencils, of course, is great for detailing, but it would have been a pain to sit with a colored pencil and cover this background. It can be done, both things, but why not make it easy on yourself if you got a couple of art supplies that work well for these things. It's still a bit grotty and uneven and stuff, but I'm gonna let it dry and see how it looks in about 15 minutes or so. Now this is dry to the touch, so I'll work on with the artichoke on its own. I see that little wet thing made that black stripe, and it tends to want to roll and lie on the wet end, wet side, so and that makes it even harder for it to dry. Um, what I would normally do is use this. This is the shiny side of my Caran d'Ache palette. This is the rough side, but I've used that for watercolors. I was testing some watercolors on here. But what I would do is scribble some paint on there and then dissolve it with a brush and then paint it on like that. That's how I would normally do it. That way I don't have a little wet piece of pastel lying around, and that dries a lot easier and a lot faster. But everybody's different, and I don't mind showing different types of techniques that I normally don't use. And I'm going to bed after this, so that can just lie there until the morning. I'll just make sure the cat doesn't come in here. Anyways, I was smart this time. I did it over there so I don't put my hand in it. I'm trying to define things a little bit again here. Now I'm a little more careful that my stripes taper off up at the top because I'm not going to continue wetting this. I'm going to start adding the details. And I can actually outline these leaves because they do have an edge, dark edge. Now, as it is very clear that I did not at all use up this set or any other set in this one sitting. So I will have to do more artwork with these art supplies. And what I think I'm going to try and do is I want to try it on a cold pressed paper, because I think part of the problem I got here is that this is hot pressed paper and I don't think it maybe has as much tooth as I would like or need. It's too dark. That is sometimes why some people like one type of art supply and other absolutely hate it. It might simply be that they use different paper. So it works brilliant for one person and not at all for another. I think I want just a little bit more yellow especially in this part because that's kind of the center. And I would like that to kind of be maybe the focal point. And the reason why I didn't use the maize color that I showed off before is because that's kind of ochre. It's a little too warm for this. So I need something that is like this probably, because I got this red base in the leaves, and it actually is a bit on these chopped off leaves too. It looks more brown on my screen. I hope you can see that it is a little reddish. Gotta check my a little more purpley, so let's add a little of this. Make it a bit warmer. It's only at the bottom really, it doesn't continue up here. I've been really harsh on these Staedtler pencils. I want to say they do work. They're not unpleasant to work with as such. My gripe about these has mostly been the price versus the performance. And I got pencils that I think work just a little bit better too. So Just not a favorite, that's all there is to that. There's some little knobs in here. They're not quite this color on my reference photo, but that's the color they get. This is not like a super realism piece. So I'm more interested in color harmony than hitting exactly the color on my reference photo. Go for more recognizable than anything really. You're gonna go into too much detail in that top. It's not my main focal point. To sharpen them a bit because I don't want too broad streaks in the rest. I'm quite sure I'm not the, oh, that's a tangent, that's a no-no. Oh. I'm sure I'm not the only artist you follow on YouTube. I follow quite a few myself, and I talk to some of them, and I'm quite fascinated on how different we do things. If you follow G. Samard, for instance, if he had done this, he has this way he works where he's meticulously finishing like one petal at the time when he draw flowers or he paint flowers. Start with one and then he finishes that and then does the next as a very intricate little puzzle. And I'm totally fascinated by his way of working. But I don't think I got enough patience and attention span to work that way myself. I'm here and there and everywhere. But we get results, both of us. It just works very, very differently. And the same with other artists, but he was just the one that came to mind as being quite an opposite to me when it comes to that. Now the background is dry. Now I'm gonna try and work that over again. This might take a few layers before it is as intense as I wanted. Or I might just end up painting the whole thing over with gouache. That's another option. There's something on the edge here. I got some dried paint. I guess I should have wished for a new work mat for Christmas, but I'll just rent that one too. And now, because this is not quite dry, it smears and it's really weird. I think I worked off all the wet stuff down there. Nope, there was some more there. Note to self, don't do this again. And this time I'll see if I got a bit of a bigger brush that is usable. Again, same type of brush. I find the brushes for acrylic just works better for this type of work. Watercolor brushes tend to be too wet. I mean, I'm perfectly happy with the crayons. It's nothing with the brand that is a little wet thing. It was my own fault for using it the way I did. They dissolve just fine. They they're quite okay. One of the reasons why I like Kardashian's new colors better is the availability of them is better. They are actually not all that much more expensive, and I can buy any color I like open stock. So there you go. If you want to try out watercolor crayons and these are the ones you can get, go right ahead. There's really nothing wrong with them. Oops. I mean, 2 layers and this is well covered and it's deep dark blackish brown as I wanted it. I'm quite satisfied. I'm gonna let that dry and I'm gonna think about it because I want a little more detail in there still. I'm just not sure how to get it. I'm not sure these pencils can do it any better because they really can't hold the point well enough. So I'll let it dry while I think and I poke around and see if I can come up with something. Okay, let's try a Pitt pen, a fine liner in magenta. Just define some edges here. Seems to work okay. On top of everything else, I was a little curious if it was gonna work. Because even though I have wetted everything a couple of times, there's still some wax left from the pencils. But not so much that it clogs up with the nib of this. It's a little bit of what I said before. Use the supply that do the job the best, and that's what I actually like about mixed media is that you can just grab whatever works for you at that instance. Now I'm curious because now I want to try this one. This is May green. See if I can get some. Just a few thin lines. The thin lines I couldn't do with the pencils because they were too soft. And the Pitt pens is in the category of absolutely favorites. I love Faber-Castell's Pitt pens. Both these and the brush pens. Now the the small fine nibbed ones, sadly only comes in 11 colors. And I think there's 60 colors of the brush nibs. If they came out with all 60 colors in the fine liners, I would probably just go get them. I got all the brush pencils, or brush pens. Yes, I like this. See up here where I barely went. Turn your artways work so that it fits with your hand movements. The best. I think some YouTube art, at least for my sake, it's not always as good as it could be, or it's not its best, because I don't always turn my artwork when I work on the camera. I do when I work by myself. But it's counterproductive to work against the curvature of your hand. For me, it's very unnatural to make curves that way. I want to do them like that. Now this is the only green one of the fine liners. The other thing, I think it's called a green. What is this called? This is called Cobalt Green, but it's not. It's very turquoise. I'm gonna sharpen this. I'm gonna go in and try and add some shading here and there. Oh, that's very, very green though. The holes just point a little better than the other one. Not super good, it's too bright. I have to try it with the lighter one of these. Well, that one didn't break, that's a good thing. It's too light. Holding my breath here, trying not to swear. Yeah, and it broke in there. And now this is full of stuff. So, yeah, it sits in there. I got another one. There's something in there too. Okay, well, we got enough sharpeners. We got the Xargot too. And this doesn't work for some reason. So, got a little handheld one. That's too big. The troubles has no end. There. That's not sharp. Oh my god. How hard is this? We're going to try the Stabilo, and that doesn't fit. That is for, what are they called? They are called Pastel Pencils. So how about you? Came to the rescue. Not dark enough. But we got more colors. Got a dark brown here. There we go. Try and mask that we got a tangent here. That was how that leaf was, and I just kind of drew it the way it was. But in terms of drawing, that's kind of a no-no. When they don't break, these are really nice. That's why it kind of irks me that they got those breaking issues because it's a nice product. Otherwise, I have to wet that. Don't need the big brush for that. I need this one. Oh, that was full of brown. Better clean that. Just slightly soften this area. And that. That's a bit of a hole in the background. I just kind of tried to cover it up. Same here, is not quite there. Don't want that bright. Can we pull some of that black in there? There we go. Yeah, I think that's as good as it gets with art materials that by and large was not my favorite. Some were. The paper is good, it held up actually to all of the abuse, even though it's a hot press. And yeah, ColourTint. It's got a long way to go before it becomes my favorite, but there's a lot of drawings left in them, so maybe things change as I use them. Who knows? Thank you all for watching. I'm amazed if you made it to the end. Please come back, like and subscribe and all that. Bye.